Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here at Spawn Fly Fish. My name is Pete, one of the co-owners, and you may also know me as Blue River Flies if you follow Instagram. Today we're going to tie a pretty simple streamer. We're going to go off of the ever popular bunny leech. We're going to jazz it up at the end with the Brook Ninja streamer head from Spawn Fly Fish. Now the hook we're using is the Arex TP610, and Arex Hook Company makes some amazingly sharp and strong predator hooks, and this is one of them. Now the hook eye on this guy is a little big. This is a size 2/0. I got rabbit hair already. But to accommodate, I just simply took out a little extra material in the front of the head so that when we finish, it's a smooth transition. I don't have to worry about it. For thread, we're just going to go with some tan 6/0, and the reason being I'd like to get a little contrast on this black nickel finish that this hook has. So we're just going to wind this back. Nothing serious. We don't have to make them real cute wraps or anything. All we're doing is putting down a nice thread base before we add our weighted wire. And the reason I'm doing so is because I'd like to give that wire just a little extra something to grab onto. Get rid of our tag end. So for the weight, I'm going to use some 0.035 non-lead weighted wire. And I'm going to start this wire right even with the point of the hook here. So as I come in, I'm going to start there, and I'm going to finish roughly one hook eye behind the end of the shank right there. If all goes well, we should have about 18 wraps. And make sure you put these wraps on pretty firm. You don't want this wire to have gaps in between the wraps or anything loose and moving on you. And we're going to tie it down afterwards, but if you have good wraps to begin with, it'll make it just that much of a stronger fly. Alright, that looks pretty good. So let's cut, and on the back end, cut again. And all we're going to do now is use the inside edge of their scissor blade here and roll that edge over so that there's no sharp end where we cut those wire. Now come to the front and do the same. Really crimp it down, and then you'll save yourself some frustration when you're wrapping over with the thread. And now the important thing here is to get thread in between every single wrap that we made with this non-lead wire. And this will, of course, adhere our wire to the hook shank, and since we have previous thread wraps underneath, once we put a little cement on here, it'll soak right through and we'll have a real solid base for our streamer. How much thread you want to put on there, well, it somewhat depends on the tension you're able to do, and you can kind of get a sense of when the gaps are filled up with thread. Looks pretty good. Normally, I would tie 10 or 12 of these guys, and you can see that some of the thread is trying to rip there, but that's okay. I would tie these, cement them, set them aside, and then when I had a dozen or so ready, I'd start again. But we're just going to go with a thin layer of some cement, and what we'll do, just for the sake of time, is add some thread wraps directly over that. Back. And now this is essentially just going to cover these wet sections so that we can continue our fly. So first thing we're going to do is add a tail to this. And for the tail, we're going to use a magnum cut zonker strip of rabbit. And when it's a zonker or a strip cut, that simply means that the hair goes with the leather on a strip. And we'll get into the difference between that and a cross cut in a little bit. My measurement for this tail is going to be roughly one hook shank length of the leather, which is the skin underneath the hair. So right about there, we'll make a cut just in front of that to give ourselves a little room for a tie-in spot. Like so. And then to get ready to tie our rabbit in, we're going to come in and trim off about a 1/4 inch or somewhere in that range of the rabbit hair, just so we have a clean spot to tie in, and then I'll just give it a little angle on both edges there. Now after we've tied our fly, we can come back and measure this, and if we need to cut a little bit off, we can. So where I'd like to tie this in, if you'll see the barb here on the hook, I'm going to try to match that up so that the end of my tie-in point matches up with that barb. See, and go ahead and be aggressive when you're wrapping on this leather of the rabbit. You really want to cinch that down right to the shank. Give it no option so that there's no rotation, no spinning. You can yank on it, it's not going to come out. That's what you need. We're throwing streamers to catch, rather large aggressive fish. We don't want to just unravel our fly after 1/6 of catch. Okay, so we've got that tied in, and at this point you could go right to the next step, which is the cross-cut rabbit, where you can add some flash. And since we're going to be using olive rabbit, I've got some olive flashaboo here, so I'm going to tie in a little bit of that. Looks like maybe about 6-7 strands, somewhere in there. Doesn't have to be exact on anything, whatever number floats your boat. And we're going to just drape that right on top of this rabbit, and we want it to come right about to the end of the rabbit strip there. So we have a good spot, tie that in, and make sure your wraps on your thread here come all the way back to where your previous wraps ended. And we call that a tie-in point. And the reason being, if you do that with every material, you'll never see any thread wraps in your fly. Okay. And at this point, if you wanted extra flash, you could easily double this over, cinch it down again, and then you'd have twice as much. I don't want to go too crazy here. Cut that off, and then always take these little tag ends and just wrap your thread right over them. Come back one more time and secure that down, and we've got flash. So now we're ready for our cross-cut rabbit. And if you remember, when we used the zonked strip where the rabbit goes with the leather, on this, when they cut it, what you get is the hair goes one side of the leather instead of straight down the middle. And why that works for us is because we're going to tie this cross-cut strip in upside down. And what we need when we wrap it is for that hair to all move towards the back of the fly. So when you're looking at preparing your rabbit strip here, if you're properly holding it to cut, this hair will always point back towards your palm. So to give ourselves a little cleaner tie-in point here, we'll just trim off some of this front hair. And again, we're going to put just a little bit of an angle on that leather itself to make it a little easier to grab when we tie it in. Okay. The other thing with rabbit, always have some water nearby. You can see I've got water on my fingertips here. And just run that through your fingertips, and this is why. You'll pull out all these excessive loose rabbit hairs. And the reason we do that is one, because it doesn't look good on a finished fly to have loose rabbit coming out. And two, it'll actually strengthen our fly, not having to try to grab with our thread or anything else, those loose fibers. And you will get rabbit everywhere. So okay, again, our rabbit hair, if we stroke it back here, pointing to our palm when we grab it, we're going to tie in with the leather facing up. And we're going to match that last tie-in point with where the rabbit hair starts here on the leather. All that goes into play. Just going to give this a couple wraps back and make sure our thread again goes all the way back to that tie-in point. So as we begin to wrap our rabbit here, it will cover up all of our thread wraps. I'm just going to cinch the rest of this down. We don't need to get too crazy about trimming up the ends here because we're just going to cover it all with rabbit. All right, once you feel like that's secured, and again, keep in mind what's going to be eating your fly. We're going to bring this thread all the way to the front here, just behind the hook eye. So at this point, add some more moisture onto your fingertips and just move this rabbit back a little bit, ease it out, so that as you start making your turns, it's going to just flow right for you towards the back. And the key here is not too much pressure, but not so little that it comes loose. Just a little bit of pressure here, and make each wrap so that the leather touches the leather from the previous wrap, and you won't have any gaps in your fly. makes it look better, and it actually makes it look move better. All right, so we're just gonna keep getting our fingertips wet here. Keep all that loose hair off of the leather, and continue wrapping. And the other thing too, when you get to your tie-in point of tying this off, what the whole thing is to keep that nice and neat. And so by keeping your fingertips wet, you'll be able to see the leather real easily and make a great tie off here. Okay. So one final time, get the fingertips wet, smooth out the rabbit hair back, and then you can see your separation here and smooth those fibers the other direction. And you've got clean leather where we're going to wrap our thread. So just once over, and now I've got it, I'm tugged down, it's secure. I'm going to add 4 or 5 more wraps right behind the previous wraps, and we're cinched down. That's not going anywhere. So now let's go ahead and get rid of this. Nice clean cut. And this is what you're left with. Now you could get in there with your scissors and play with that, but we're just going to wrap it all up because we've got another material yet to go. If you try to finish your fly at this stage, what you would run into is because of the size of the cavity in the head, there's nothing for it to hold on to. So what we're going to do is make sure it's got a steadier base to grab and give this fly just a little more movement in doing so. So what we've got here is an olive schlappen feather. We're going to tie it in at the tip of the feather versus the base. So what we're going to do is just grab it and start moving these fibers back towards the base of the quill. And why we're doing that will be evident here pretty quickly. So I'm just going to cut that, and then I'm going to trim down maybe 5 or 6 fibers on either side. Maybe that's a little more, but it doesn't matter. And what we're left with are these, little nubs of the fibers. And we're going to actually use those to grab for the thread. And so we're going to go right on top with the top of the feather, or the convex side facing the top. We're going to go right there, top. And trim this front piece just a little. Perfect. And we'll bring the thread right behind the hook eye. Now it looks like we're going to crowd, but because of the size of the cavity, we're really not going to have any issues. So now with the top facing the hook eye, we're going to get our fingers wet again and start stroking these fibers back, so that when we wrap this feather, what's going to happen is we'll double up the fibers essentially on each wrap, and it will all flow towards the back, which is what we're going for. And just, if you can keep stroking these fibers before each turn, you'll never run into any issues. Never serious issues anyway. All right. We're really going to load this up with some fibers, so don't be scared about getting to the end of it. This is probably crowding it one too many, but here we go. So at this point, when we try to come up again, you can see that it'll splay these fibers on the top edge. So go ahead and grab those, and as you come up with the quill, you'll notice the section wants to be stuck together, and we can either rip them or just grab them with your other fingers. And at this point, we're going to come over with our thread and tie off that quill. Like so. And again, 4 or 5 wraps should get her done. One more just in case. Come and make a nice clean snip on that quill. And at this point, all we need to do is come back with our thread. Make sure all those fibers behave where they're supposed to. And now we're going to have a lot more body behind this head. So when we do glue it on, it's got something to fill it and also to attach to. And now we just need a couple good whip finishes here. Be ready for some glue. One. And again, when you whip finish, if you've got an upside down figure 4, as you come up, you're doing all right. So let's just trim that. And now We're going to apply whatever intense blue is your favorite. It doesn't take a whole lot, but we also don't want to come back and have to do this again. So make sure we get enough around the edge there. That's about right. Okay, now for the coup de grace. We're going to slip the head on here. Right there, it's meeting resistance. And make sure it lines up everywhere. And that's that. So here you have pretty much a bunny leech. Some magnum brown for the tail, little flash, little olive cross-cut rabbit, and to finish it all off, a little olive schlappen. Thanks for joining us here at Spawn Fly Fish. Be sure to check out spawnflyfish.com, see any of the new heads we're coming out with, and also see more tying tutorials. Thank you.